Silver. 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 Let's talk about silver now. Okay, I want to talk to you a little something about the silver story. And it's something that happened a few years back with two Texas tycoons. The infamous Hunt brothers. They nearly completely crashed the silver market in the 1980s. If you aren't familiar with the Hunt brothers, they were one of America's richest families of all time. Bunker and Hubert Hunt, sons of a Texas oil tycoon. They were the inspiration of the famous Dallas character, J.R. Ewing. If you remember back when, who was that played J.R. Ewing? I can't remember. It was the same guy that used to play in I Dream of Jeannie. Trying to think of his name, just on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, so they were one of the richest. The Hunt brothers were one of the richest American families of all time. Bunker and Hubert Hunt were the Texas sons of a Texas oil tycoon, and they had millions of dollars. They struck it big. But in the 1970s, inflation began to skyrocket in the United States. And there was oil and food shortages, countrywide riots, and the Vietnam War began eroding the people's trust in the government. And the dollar lost more of its value. The Hunt's oil profits began dropping along with the dollar. Since it was actually illegal for private citizens to hold gold at the time, the brothers targeted silver as the best available inflation hedge. And they really targeted it. They almost single-handedly cornered the silver market. Their silver investments, they began kind of like a hedge against inflation, and a hedge against the turmoil at home and abroad. And the Hunts, they had this particular way of going all in. So the Hunt brothers bought up to 200,000 ounces of silver, and they bought it at $1.50 an ounce. And within a year, they had 55 million ounces of silver. They had 8% of the world's deliverable silver supply. Now, you got to understand, the deliverable silver supply back then was much greater than it is today. In order to keep it out of the hands of the U.S. government, they took delivery of the physical metal, and they had a team of 12 sharpshooting cowboys to watch the stuff and escort their precious metal to safe hiding spots. They were called the Circle K Cowboys. They guarded 3 planes that they used to use under the cover of nighttime to fly the massive caches of 40 million ounces of silver. They loaded the silver on and they hand-delivered it to 6 locations in Switzerland. These guys knew how to do it. And they weren't done buying silver. They even bought more. They attempted to completely corner the market. At the height of their hoarding, the brothers amassed a war chest of over $4.5 billion worth of silver. That would be worth $44 billion today. Now, here's the thing. Believe it or not, we got the same thing happening today, but it's with a different bunch. It's not the Hunt brothers. And they're doing it different. Because the Hunt brothers, they were taking possession of the physical. And back then, the silver paper market wasn't as expanded as it is today. The guys that are doing it today are J.P. Morgan. And he is basically doing the same thing, but they're creating so many paper contracts on the other end that they're not affecting the price like the Hunt brothers did. But they're not affecting the price, but they're affecting the physical supply. And here's a ticket. Eventually, the physical supply, it's kind of like the way it is right now, is the tail is wagging the dog. And if you don't know what I mean by that, what I mean to say is the tail's wagging the dog. I mean that the physical silver supply on the earth today, the paper supply is much greater than the physical supply. And the paper silver supply is the tail that's wagging the dog. It's not working the way it should work. And it's because of all the paper silver contracts. The price of the silver is actually being determined not by the physical supply, but by the paper contracts that are available on the market. And so what we have here is a very screwball situation. And the J.P. Morgan Bank is hoarding the silver, but they're hoarding the real physical. And they're increasing at the same time increasing the supply of the paper out there. So sooner or later, what's going to happen is we're going to run out of physical supply. Now, the U.S. Geological Survey, a few years back, they did a survey on silver, and they said that silver would be the first metal to go extinct on the periodic table. This is true. And also, another little tidbit of information is that back around 1983, there was much more silver in silver inventories on the earth. That's silver that's available for actually sale, physical silver. Now, those inventories have dropped off remarkably. They're not letting us know exactly how much silver is still available in world inventories. It's hard to get an actual estimate or an actual number on this. And I think there's a reason for this. I think that it's like a guy who has been driving his car. Do you remember the old Seinfeld where the guy had the tank in the car and he was driving along and seeing how far he could go on empty? And he was like, "Wow, look, guys, I've made it this much further on empty." And he's like, "Yay!" He's tapping the gauge and everything. That's, I think, where we're going right now. We're driving on a car that's empty of gas, and we think that it's still going. The car's still going, but the gas tank says E, empty. And we're still going, and we're like seeing how far we can go with this before we actually run out of physical. But you know, when we run out of physical, it's going to be one of these things where it just goes like that. Boom. You're going to go into your silver guy one of these days, and there's going to be none available. And so for all these guys out there that are actually waiting for the day when you can get the cheaper price, and you've been holding back, all of a sudden this thing's going to hit while you're asleep. And you're going to wake up the next morning, you're going to go in, they're not going to have any silver at all. It's going to be all cleaned out. It's going to clean out that fast. And there's always some guy that's going to get in there ahead of you. Trust me. And so you better get a little bit, even if it's at the higher price, because then at least you'll have some. Because when this thing hits, you'll be awful sad if you don't have any. Thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next article. Bye.